The words hung in the air like gun smoke after a killing. Sarah McKenna stood in the doorway of his ranch house, her calico dress dusty from the long ride, her green eyes blazing with the kind of desperation that made men do foolish things. Behind her, two small faces peered around her skirts, a boy of maybe 8, a girl no more than 6, both carrying that hollow look of children who'd seen too much. "Marry me or leave," she'd said, and now the silence stretched between them like a canyon neither could cross. Jacob Thorne set down his coffee cup with deliberate care, the porcelain clicking against the wooden table. Through the window his cattle grazed in the evening light, peaceful and predictable. Everything he'd built in 10 years of backbreaking work, everything that was his alone. No complications, no promises he couldn't keep. "Sarah," he began, but she cut him off with a sharp shake of her head. "Don't," her voice cracked like a whip. "Don't give me your gentle words, Jacob Thorne. I've had enough gentle words to last 3 lifetimes." The boy Tommy, Jacob remembered, stepped forward, his small chin jutting out with manufactured courage. "Mama says you're a good man. Mama don't lie." The girl Emma clutched a corn-husk doll to her chest, its button eyes staring accusingly at Jacob. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the sound seemed to echo the loneliness that had been eating at his bones for months. Sarah had been coming around since spring, bringing fresh bread and mended shirts, her children trailing behind her like shadows. Her husband had died in a mining accident up in Silver Creek, leaving her with nothing but debt and 2 mouths to feed. The whole territory knew her story. Most felt sorry for her. Some whispered she was hunting for a husband with indecent haste. Jacob had told himself he was just being neighborly, but when she smiled, really smiled, not the practiced expression she wore for the shopkeepers in town, something inside his chest loosened like a knot finally giving way. Now she stood before him with ultimatum blazing in her eyes, and Jacob felt the walls of his carefully ordered life closing in. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters with fingers that sounded almost human. "You can't just show up here and demand," Jacob started, but Sarah's bitter laugh cut through his words like a blade through leather. "Demand?" She stepped into his kitchen as if she owned it, her children following close behind. "I'm not demanding anything I haven't already given you, Jacob Thorne. 6 months of cooking your meals, mending your clothes, warming your bed when you'd let me." Her cheeks flushed, but her gaze never wavered. "I'm asking you to make it honest." Tommy's eyes widened at his mother's boldness, while Emma buried her face in her doll's yarn hair. Jacob felt heat crawl up his neck. They'd been careful, discreet. Or so he'd thought. "People talk," Sarah continued, reading his expression. "They say I'm your kept woman. They say my children will grow up bastards because their mother's a whore." She spat the word like poison. "My Tommy got into 3 fights at school last week defending my honor. Emma won't play with the other girls because their mothers won't let them near her." Jacob's hands clenched into fists. "Who's been saying, it doesn't matter who?" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. "What matters is that I won't let my children pay for my mistakes. I won't let them suffer because I was lonely and you were kind." The boy stepped forward again, his small boots echoing on the wooden floor. "Are you gonna be our PA?" he asked, and the simple question hit Jacob like a punch to the gut. "Tommy, hush," Sarah warned, but the damage was done. Emma lifted her head from her doll, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged cheeks. "We ain't got nobody else," she whispered. "Mama cries at night when she thinks we're sleeping." The admission hung between them like a loaded gun. Jacob saw the way Sarah's jaw tightened, the way her hands trembled before she clasped them behind her back. Pride was all she had left, and her children were stripping it away with their innocent honesty. Through the window, Jacob caught sight of dust rising on the horizon, riders moving fast. His stomach dropped as he recognized the lead horse, a paint gelding that belonged to Ezra Blackwood, the most influential rancher in 3 counties. Behind him rode 2 other men, their intentions as clear as the iron on their hips. "Sarah," Jacob said quietly, "we've got company." The hoofbeats drummed against the earth like war drums, and Sarah instinctively pulled her children closer. Jacob moved to the window, his hand resting on the colt at his hip. 3 riders approached at a gallop, their dust cloud billowing behind them like the shadow of judgment itself. Ezra Blackwood reined in his paint just yards from the porch, his weathered face set in grim lines. Behind him, his foreman Pete Garrison and another ranch hand Jacob didn't recognize sat their horses with the casual confidence of men accustomed to getting their way through intimidation. Thorne, Blackwood's voice carried the authority of a man who owned half the territory. "We need to talk." Jacob stepped onto the porch, leaving Sarah and the children inside. The evening air crackled with tension, and somewhere in the distance thunder rumbled despite the clear sky. "What brings you out here, Ezra?" Blackwood's cold eyes flicked to the window where Sarah's silhouette was visible. "Heard you've been keeping interesting company." The McKenna widow, he spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Word is you've been sampling goods you ain't paid for." Jacob's jaw tightened. "Watch your tongue, Blackwood, or what?" Pete Garrison leaned forward in his saddle, hand resting on his gun butt. "You'll defend the honor of a woman who ain't got none." The third rider, a lean man with dead eyes, said nothing but watched Jacob like a snake watching a mouse. The message was clear. This wasn't a social call. "Here's the thing, Thorne," Blackwood continued, his voice deceptively casual. "I've got a business proposition for the widow McKenna. Her late husband owed me considerable money, and I'm willing to forgive the debt in exchange for services rendered." "She's not for sale," Jacob said, his voice deadly quiet. Blackwood's smile was winter cold. "Everything's for sale, boy. Question is whether you're buying or just renting." He gestured toward the house. "Way I see it, you've had your fun. Time to let a man of substance take responsibility for the woman and her brats." Behind him, Jacob heard the soft creak of floorboards. Sarah had moved closer to the door, probably listening to every word. Her children's future hung in the balance of whatever happened in the next few minutes. "She's under my protection," Jacob said, the words coming out before he'd fully thought them through. "Is she now?" Blackwood's eyebrows rose mockingly. "And what exactly does that mean, Thorne? You prepared to make an honest woman of her, or are you just playing at being a man?" The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a branding iron. Jacob felt the weight of Sarah's gaze through the window, felt the trust of 2 innocent children who'd asked him to be their father. Everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, balanced on the edge of a knife. "Give us a minute, Ezra." Jacob's voice carried a calm he didn't feel. "This is between me and the lady." Blackwood's laugh was harsh as winter wind. "Don't take too long, boy. My patience ain't infinite." Jacob turned and walked back into the house, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Sarah stood in the center of the room, her children flanked beside her like soldiers awaiting orders. Emma clutched her corn-husked doll tighter, while Tommy's small hands had balled into fists. "You heard," Jacob said quietly. Sarah nodded, her green eyes reflecting a pain deeper than any physical wound. "I heard." She swallowed hard. "He's got legal claim to Daniel's debts. If we don't." She couldn't finish the sentence. Tommy stepped forward, his young voice steady despite the tremor Jacob could see in his small frame. "Mr. Thorne, Mama told us about you, how you saved her from the wolves last winter, how you fixed our roof when the storms came." He paused, gathering courage. "She said you was different from other men." Emma moved closer, holding out her doll with solemn ceremony. "This was my grandmama's," she whispered. "Mama says when you love someone, you share your treasures." She pressed the worn toy into Jacob's calloused hands. "We ain't got much else to give." The simple gesture hit Jacob harder than any blow he'd ever taken. The doll was worn from the child's embrace, its fabric soft from countless nights of comfort. He looked down at these 2 small souls who'd already lost so much, who were willing to trust him with their most precious possession. Sarah's voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. "I know it's not what you planned, Jacob. I know we're not what you dreamed of when you built this place." Tears traced clean paths down her dusty cheeks. "But we could be a family. A real family." Through the window, Jacob could see Blackwood checking his pocket watch, his patience wearing thin. The man had power, influence, and the law on his side. He could make life impossible for all of them if Jacob refused his claim. But looking at Emma's trusting eyes, at Tommy's desperate hope, at Sarah's quiet dignity in the face of impossible circumstances, Jacob felt something shift inside his chest. The walls he'd built around his heart didn't seem so important anymore. He knelt down, placing Emma's doll carefully on the table before taking both children's hands in his. "If I say yes," he said softly, "I need you to understand something. Being a father means protecting your family, no matter what. It means standing up to bad men, even when you're scared. Can you be brave enough for that?" Both children nodded solemnly, and Jacob saw his answer reflected in their eyes. Jacob rose to his full height, Emma's doll cradled gently in one hand, and walked to the door. Sarah followed, her children pressed close to her sides. The evening air still crackled with tension, but something fundamental had shifted in the space between heartbeats. "Made your decision, Thorn?" Blackwood asked, his voice carrying the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. "I have." Jacob stepped fully onto the porch, Sarah beside him. "Sarah McKenna is going to be my wife tonight if Preacher Williams will come out from town." Blackwood's face darkened like a storm cloud. "You're making a mistake, boy." "Maybe," Jacob replied, his hand finding Sarah's, "but it's my mistake to make." Pete Garrison started to reach for his gun, but Jacob's Colt cleared leather first, the metallic click echoing in the stillness. "I wouldn't," Jacob said quietly. Behind him he heard Tommy gasp, and felt Emma press closer to her mother's skirts. "You can't outdraw all three of us," Garrison snarled. "Don't have to." Jacob's smile held no warmth. "Just have to outdraw you, Pete. Question is whether Ezra thinks your life is worth the price of his pride." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Blackwood raised his hand, and Garrison slowly eased back in his saddle. The rancher's cold eyes studied Jacob with new respect. "This ain't over, Thorn." "Yes, it is." Sarah stepped forward, her voice carrying steel Jacob had never heard before. "My husband's debts died with him, Ezra Blackwood. You want to collect from a dead man, you'll have to dig him up." Blackwood's jaw worked silently before he jerked his reins. "Enjoy your new family, Thorn. Hope they're worth what they're going to cost you." The three riders wheeled their horses and thundered away, leaving only dust and the distant echo of hoofbeats. Jacob holstered his gun, and turned to find Tommy staring at him with something approaching hero worship. "Are you really gonna marry Mama?" the boy asked. "If she'll have me," Jacob replied, offering his hand to the child. After a moment's hesitation, Tommy took it, his small fingers disappearing into Jacob's coal-used palm. Emma tugged on Sarah's dress. "Mama, does this mean we get to stay?" Sarah knelt down, gathering both children into her arms. "It means we're home, baby girl. Finally home." Years later, when the children had children of their own, they would tell the story of the night their family was born, how their mother had demanded a choice and their new father had chosen love over safety, courage over comfort. They would remember the corn-husk doll that sat on the mantelpiece, faded but treasured, a reminder that sometimes the most precious things come from the smallest hands and the biggest hearts. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered across the prairie, Sarah would still catch Jacob's eye across the dinner table and smile, the real smile that had captured his heart, the one that said some gambles are worth everything you have to lose.